Hi. The fall semester 1972 at the William B. Heroy Geology Lab in Syracuse was very exciting one. Indeed, it is the first semester for me. One thing that happened was the Agnes flood. In other words, by the third week of September, Syracuse was going through, or the upstate New York was going through a heavy rainfall, practically 24 hours of the day for almost a week. This Agnes storm, a cyclonic storm in the Atlantic shore of the United States, sat along the shore, along the coastal land, and migrated slowly northward, and took about 7 days to get out of the mainland United States and into the Atlantic Ocean. The Susquehanna Basin in the state of Pennsylvania, which is to the west side of the upstate New York, went through huge flood havoc. I don't exactly remember how many people died. At any rate, when something like this strikes United States, life loss is very, very minimal, whereas property loss will be huge. Of course, there is what is called a FEMA. The federal government will immediately step in with a huge fund for the relief work, or in fact to be given away to people who are directly affected by the flood. New York State also had its share of damages, and then we had a continuous rain. But then Professor Muller, a geomorphologist in the University of Syracuse, he was planning to go to sunny Binghamton, State University of New York, Binghamton. It is not sunny, it's SUNY. And because the second international conference of geomorphologists was being held in the third week. One of the things most of the professors do is they will also take minimum 5 to 6 students along to those such conferences, because conferences are a place where you get to see the big names in life and blood, big names in the specialty. So there was a sign-up sheet in the bulletin board, and I think there are only 5 slots. As soon as I saw that sign-up sheet signed by Muller, I went into his office and said, "Sir, can I also go?" "Why not?" That was the answer. "You're welcome." So I also wrote my name in that. Well, if you missed some classes because of this trip to attend a conference, it is not just reckoned as attendance or being present in the campus. Only thing is, what you have to do is you will have to make sure that you make up for whatever loss you incurred due to the being away from the classes. In fact, to tell you the truth, there is no question of taking attendance on the part of the students or on the part of the faculty by the HOD. They all work on what is called a matter, on the basis of a matter of trust. Nobody will, a teacher will not come to the office or attend his work unless there is a death in the family. Or if we, like for example, Muller going away to SUNY Binghamton, the classes he probably would have taught, that will be filled in by another faculty or a graduate student, a senior graduate student. Anyway, on a Wednesday morning, around 7 o'clock, why on a Wednesday? On the third week of September, Wednesday morning, Professor Muller drove along with 5 of the students down to Binghamton in the south of Syracuse. somewhere around 70 miles away to the south. And we first thing we did was, Mullah did was, drove into some kind of what is called a motel, because motels are perhaps the cheapest accommodation anybody can buy in United States. We checked into the motel, freshened up, we then from there drove to campus. How did we drive from Syracuse? The so-called Syracuse University of Orange van, and with the label Department of Geology, etc., Syracuse University, etc. So then we just went straight into the registration. The students' registration was there, but there was no fee charge. The only thing is you'll have to identify as students. Some kind of, we do have an identification card. Then, as far as this conference was concerned, it is a 3-day session. It was organized by Don Coates and Mary Morisawa, two of the internationally known geomorphologists. Both are quantitative geomorphologists. Well, I think Mary Morisawa was trained by Davis, and Davis was then Davis served in the Columbia University, New York, with William Morris Davis, one of the giants of geomorphology. And in that meeting, a very interesting thing, there is an auditorium, 250-seat auditorium, as part of the Department of Geosciences in that building, in that university campus. And there were a lot of students, young as well as various senior fellows, professors, and some of the authors who wrote books on, the geoscience, different fields of geoscience. And I met one man, an Indian student, in that campus, a geology student doing a PhD in geology, and who later on joined what is called Shell Oil, and he studied in some Annamalai University, and then he went for a PhD in IIT Powai. From there, he got a fellowship to go to he went to what is called University of Texas, Austin. Earned a first semester, he was on his own. And then second semester onwards, he was under assistantship of the department. Worked with Professor Robert Folk. And then he came over to SUNY Binghamton to do a PhD. And at the moment, I don't remember his name. And he is just my own contemporary also, like for example, 1965 MSc from Annamalai University. In fact, on several decades later, I went to Annamalai University as a guest to speak to the students and teachers on in two sessions, which was funded by a grant this gentleman gave to the Annamalai University. Well, then about the conference. The conference was very interesting. There were people like M.O. Hayes, Victor Baker, and several others. People who have been, Victor Baker was reporting on or making a presentation, half-an-hour presentation on the Lake Missoula flood. And it is a catastrophic flood. It is a Pleistocene flood due to the breakage of an ice dam which otherwise created what is called the Lake Missoula in the Snake River Basin in the northwestern United States. I was flabbergasted because, it is such a severe flood event. There is no parallel to that in the modern times. And this flood, then, I was sighing whenever Baker made an observation or a comment about the fierce flood, I was stunned. And of course, beside me was seated John Beer Bauer. This gentleman is a professor. He wrote probably the first book, not the first book, a book on vertebrate paleontology. And he was teaching somewhere in one of the universities in the Michigan state. And then after the break, after the talk was concluded, this professor told me that, gentleman, young man, when J. Harlan Bretz, a professor of geology in the University of Chicago, where Bierbauer was a student, spoke about this flood initially on the basis of or based on a study of aerial photographs and also at the field exposure. This class was also stunned, like I was stunned. Then another interesting talk was by M.O. Hayes. M.O. Hayes is one of those students of Robert Folk, Texas A&M. M.O. Hayes was then affiliated to University of Massachusetts, Amherst, Massachusetts. And he was talking about the coastal processes, beach processes, erosion, redeposition, etc. in Alaska. Because Alaska was, those days, really remote. And most people in the geology profession had not seen Alaska unless there was an obligation to visit Alaska by the job you have then. So that was very interesting in the sense that the sand is differently made. Basalt sand was there, or sand basalt composition, larger class, etc., where the what you called the specialties. And not only that, even the beach will be covered by snow during the winter. And in the evening of that day, there was some kind of a slideshow with a music background. Of course, chosen selectively by Miles Hayes only, which went about for 1 hour, which was a fantastic thing, which touched not only very little of geology, but about the what is called the ecology of the area. And another aspect was that there were several presentations about the coastal erosion, beach erosion, rebuilding, etc., along the Atlantic coast, along the Gulf Coast, as well as along the what is called the Pacific coast or the California coast, because this focus was mainly of this conference was on beach processes. In fact, I had a copy of these proceedings of the in a book form, edited by Morisawa and Don Coates until recently, which is now I'm missing some. Anyway, so that's all the reports were very exciting because I found some kind of a parallel, and not only a parallel with Kerala, but the need for investigating the beach process. In fact, as far as Kerala was concerned those days, the beach was undergoing erosion and deposition. But of course, the immediate remedy is the revenue village officer will go and gather all the people who suffered the erosion and the loss of property. They are put in a school and given a free ration. That's all we did. Even today, that is what we do. We are not putting any science into it, though there are scientific studies and reports and recommendations thereof lying in the different organizations as well as with the government. Government is the last agency to use scientific data in order to develop or conserve or manage any situation like a catastrophic situation like beach erosion. Because though, after all, over all these decades in Kerala, flood as well as landslides were of no consequence. because very rare occurrence they had. Only problem was about the erosion of the beaches, and the people there, for some reason, settled there, always clamored for building a seawall. Unfortunately, seawall is actually not the first solution or the last solution. Retreat is the first solution. Now there is a beach erosion going on in Kerala, in Chellanam, in Thrivikramji, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so then in that meeting, I had a thought flashing through my mind that it is an important area where I should do some kind of a first-hand study when I come back to Kerala. And then on the third day, of course, there was a group photo exactly. And after the group photo session, we all took leave of the conference and started driving by around 3 o'clock in the afternoon towards Syracuse, and were home by 5. Another thing that happened in the fall semester was, and not exactly what is called in the same month, but last week of November, because their winter has already set in, was what is called a second Geo Chautauqua, organized by the International Association of Mathematical Geologists, and whose Secretary General is Professor Miriam, Chairman of the Department of Geology. That was also a big event. Not like what had happened in the International Geomorphology Conference, big event in the sense that I could see many of those big names like W.C. Crumbine, John Griffiths. Crumbine is from Northwestern University, John Griffiths is from Penn State, then William Harbaugh from Stanford, Richard McCammon from the University of Chicago at the Illinois Circle, and naturally, John Davies from Kansas Geological Survey, and many others in the country, especially graduate students who have been working toward a PhD or master's in mathematical geology or computer applications in geology. Harbaugh and Miriam had authored a book on computer application stratigraphy, and a John Wiley book. And so, what is the Geo Chautauqua? Miriam is very inventive. Well, why Miriam? Most of the Western thought thinkers, because they never divorce themselves from thinking, especially the scientists and teachers, academic researchers. And Miriam invented this word Chautauqua and named it after a county in the state of New York. Chautauqua means a scholarly person who is going around in the country, in the province, and talking to select groups about the new knowledge he has gained, and he shares the knowledge with the rest of the people. That is what Chautauqua is. Geo Chautauqua actually then obviously means this kind of sharing of knowledge by the highly professional people on the geological aspects, and in this case, the geological aspect was computer applications in geology. That year, 1972, the IBM had introduced, not that year, that decade, 1970 onwards, the third generation mainframe computers with very high and very fast computing capabilities. So this session was wondering how the research methods can be, or what is the research method? Data on the one hand, and simulating the data into some scenario, stratigraphic or formational, whatever scenario, or environmental scenario, or tectonics if you want, using the third generation computers and the software programs appropriately modified to be run on the third generation computers. All the major universities will immediately go for this kind of facility, computing facility. And the very interesting thing is, no university will buy a computer. Instead, they only rent it on a monthly basis or an annual contract basis. In other words, when you rent a machine from IBM, so the upkeep and replacement of parts or components, etc., will be responsibility of the international business machines. So we had what is called Agnes flood, followed by the International Geology Conference, and then in the month of November, the Geo Chautauqua, the second Geo Chautauqua, held in the Hero Geology Lab in the Syracuse University. Well, that is what happened in the first 2 months of 1972, September and November.